Hello and welcome to the third lecture in the November Talk series. These set of talks are supported by the Sto Foundation, which has been promoting educational projects for architecture students around the world for 15 years. The November Talks, which are normally face-to-face events in university lecture halls, are also part of this. I'd like to thank Sto on behalf of the students and faculty at the London School of Architecture. Speaking of the LSA, I've got Peter Buchanan here with me. He is Reader in Architecture and Urbanism at the LSA and will be in conversation with Anna after the lecture. After that, I'll be reading questions from the audience. So if you do think of a question, pop it in the chat box and I can read it out. And so on to today's lecture, we have, as mentioned, Anna Heringer. Anna is an architect and honorary professor of the UNESCO Chair of Earth and Architecture, Building Cultures and Sustainable Development. She's been actively involved in development cooperation projects in Bangladesh since 1997. Over the years, Anna has realised further projects in Asia, Africa and Europe. Together with Martin Rauch, she has developed a method of clay storming that she teaches at various universities, including ETH Zurich, UP Madrid, TU Munich and Harvard GSD. Anna has received numerous honours, including the Global Award for Sustainable Architecture, the Architectural Views Emerging Architecture Awards in 2006 and 2008, the Loeb Fellowship at Harvard GSD and a RIBA International Fellowship. And so, without further ado, over to you, Anna.
Yeah, hello, James. Hello, Peter. Nice to see you again. Hello, everyone on the screen. Welcome to Laufen, to my Bavarian home. Yeah, for me, architecture is a tool to improve lives. And I deeply believe that we have a very powerful tool that also gives us a lot of responsibility to use it in a careful way. Because unfortunately, the other way is true as well. Architecture is also a tool to destroy lives. So we better be sensitive with it. So this slide shows a study trip that I did with my students at ETH Zurich. It was the end of October. It was pretty cold. It was in the mountains of Austria. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I surprised them with the fact that there was no hut or any accommodation booked for the night. And the challenge was to build your own shelter with whatever you could find. And the accommodations that the students built were not really luxurious. Mine neither. It was really damn cold, but it was a wonderful learning experience. That there are a lot of resources given by nature for free, and all we need is our sensitivity to see those resources and our creativity to use them. And I found myself in a similar situation when I was 19 years old. I went to a remote Bangladeshi village called Budapur with the aim, just to learn about development work. And I had a wonderful teacher, which was the NGO Deepshika. And from them, I learned that the most resilient and effective strategy for development is always to really look at the resources that you have available and try to make the best out of it and not getting depending on external factors. And then 7 years later, I tried to bring this kind of philosophy into architecture. And in terms of materials, I didn't have to look far. They were right under my feet, the mud, the dirt, the clay, however you call it, and the bamboo that was just growing around. So for me, local materials are really essential for every project. And what I'm also looking for is local energy sources. And for me, human energy is really a very important source of energy. When we think of alternative energies, we always think of solar, of wind, and so on. But the human energy is a growing source. We have more than 7 billion people. And furthermore, if we don't use this resource, we also create a social problem because we need good work opportunities for people. So the people were all, the workers were all coming from the direct surrounding, from the village and the neighboring villages. And tools were an issue too, but we had these guys, water buffaloes, fantastic mixing machine. They mix the straw, the water, and the mud, which are the ingredients of the wall. And then you take the wet mix and take it by the hand and put it on top of a brick foundation. And then all you need as a further tool is a spade that has kind of a, oh, okay, the videos, it's a bit of a delay. I'm sorry, I'm a bit impatient with the slides. Don't know what to do now. Let's see. So yes, so you see it's just cut in accurate shape with this kind of spade. And then the next mix comes on top of it. So that's a very basic building method that is also traditional method. What we just introduced is the straw that acts as a kind of a reinforcement in the mix, and the foundation. Now, after 6 months of construction, the school looked like this. For the realization, I had a partner, Eike Roswak, with me. And the school itself was my diploma project at the University of Arts in Linz. And the school is really earth, load-bearing earth walls on the ground floor. And then you have the bamboo that kind of brings the lightness in, and it also has this kind of power pose, which I think is a beautiful symbol also for education, for empowering the young generation. On the ground floor, the classrooms are just very neutrally kept, and they also have the tradition to sit on the ground. We kept this tradition, and through this kind of hole in the back wall, you come into the cave rooms. And for me, the briefing of the client was to design a building where the children feel well and joyful. So I tried to remember the places that I loved when I was a kid. And I guess that a lot of you can relate to that. It's this very protective feeling, either under bushes or under the table with the tablecloths, but you still have full control over what's going on. You can peek out and see and listen to everything what's going on. So the same thing is with the caves. They still have a good connection to the classroom. So whenever they feel angry or sad or just overwhelmed, they can go grab a book and be in the caves, or they do, different group works in the caves, of course, playing. So they have a lot of different actions in the caves, and also meditation, because it's part of the school philosophy too. And the top floor is more the treehouse pattern in a way. So you have, the overview, and for many children, it's the only building in the village, or at all in their life, that in their young life, that they have experienced in a two-story way. So reaching a different level also is, of course, something that is empowering also. The children all signed with the names in Bengali at the doors, and they rightfully did so because they also helped building the school. So every afternoon they would come to the site and would work with us. And we especially had 2 teachers with us who were only responsible for including the children in the process. And of course, you cannot do this with every material, but mud is an extremely inclusive material. We found work for everyone, like for the small one, for the old one, for people with disabilities. So, and that makes it for me also a very socially sustainable material, because it's, I think, very important. Every person wants to feel useful and wants to feel needed. So for the kids, it was a fantastic experience to be part of this whole construction. And I think you can all imagine how it feels in the end when you stand as a small girl or boy in front of that school building, and then you just know, wow, I did this thing with just using my hands and the dirt underneath my feet. And that just gives such an enormous boost in your own self-confidence, and of course also in the confidence in the team, and in the local building materials and the resources they have available, which is very important. So especially mud has a very bad image, said to be non-durable, which is actually not true, because if you consider certain rules, then they can last hundreds of years. So the first rule is a good foundation, and the second rule is a good roof, so that the walls are protected, from down and from top for the water. And then the third rule is erosion control. Just like a hill needs rocks and trees in order to slow down the speed of the water running over the hill, which is causing the erosion. It's the same thing with the facade. You make speed breakers, that could be bricks of lines of bricks or mortar, or in that case, bamboo shingles that kind of slow down the pace of the water running over the facade. And then on a micro level, in the mix itself, you have to have some rough ingredients such as stones or straw that also give some roughness, so that the water slows down. And that's all that is needed to really keep this wall strong. No cement added except in the foundation. And it's really that the walls are standing now they were built in 2005, so they have experienced many rainy seasons with harsh horizontal monsoon rains, and the walls are standing strong. For me, it's very important not to stabilize the earth and not to change the earth, the material, because it's a fantastic material. It's the only material you can take from the ground. You can recycle as often as you want without any loss of quality, and you can turn it back to the ground and plant your garden on top. So why would you kind of do a harm to this natural cycle while you just, I mean, that's the champion in terms of sustainability, this small kind of circle that you have. And so I would never add something in the walls to change the material, but what we need to change are the tools, are the technologies to scale up the processes. In terms of economic sustainability, the wonderful thing was that I was living in the village, and often in the evening I would go with the workers with the bicycle to the local markets, and I could see how they immediately spent the money that they just got from the daily wages. So I could see that the building budget was immediately invested in the vegetables of the neighbors, you know, in the village, or they got a new haircut on the local market, or a new sari blouse at the tailor. So the building project had as a result not only a school building, but it was also a catalyst for local development. And that was for me the most important thing, because if I had built the school with steel and concrete and so on, this money would have been exported and lost for those families. So when I'm in the end of my career as an architect, I really want to be able to tell myself that I invested, you know, if you add up all the sums, all the building budgets that you have in your hand, you come up to really millions of euros or pounds or whatever. And so this is a power that we have in our hands. So I want to really be able to tell myself that I invested in people and not in materials, and certainly not in carbon emissions. So this, because the METI school got several awards, I was able to make the second building there, which is a school for electrical vocational training, the Deshi Center. And for that building, the most important thing was to go 2 stories with the mud, because the mud is more durable than the bamboo, and to save land. And the crazy thing is that there is such a scarcity of land in Bangladesh, and still millions of Bangladeshi in the rural area just live in single-story houses. So it would be a comparatively small step to go into 2 stories, but it would set free a lot of land resources to feed the people, which is enormously important in Bangladesh. Another topic was to bring in even more craftsmanship, more refined craftsmanship, because a lot of traditions are getting lost, and cultural know-how. For example, the basket weaving, because also the plastic buckets from China or whatever are getting cheaper, so people are using them and not so much the local baskets anymore. So I just use basket weaving in a slightly bigger scale. So I'm always trying, you know, to increase the know-how in this building. So for me, the most important is really that no waste is left behind. I'm fully okay if my buildings are degrading one day and are being composted on earth one day, but I want to make sure that there's a lot of know-how created and passed on through taking care of this building, so that the coming generations can really use the local materials and rebuild buildings in the way that fit even better to their needs, because we can never foresee what needs the coming generations may have. These were the drawings. So when we started the site, I had only a feeling in my belly how this building could look like. And then I was just doing sketches just like this. And these were the only drawings. In the beginning, I even didn't have an elevation. And that was the most beautiful process, because I was there on the site all the time, along with my team, with Stefan Neumann, Monte Ramchon, and Kondako Hazibul Kobiat. So it was wonderful to just, I felt more like a conductor, you know, I knew, or I felt when I could step back and give space to the craftsmen, and I knew when I have to step in again and say, well, you know, these are the proportions, and this is the way, you know, how I want to have the structure done. But it was really, it was a very organic process and a very intuitive process, and I think is a process that a lot of our building culture has been built in exactly that kind of process. And that makes it also very lively. So this building is very much rooted in the Bangladeshi context and culture. We also had, that was a big issue for me. I wanted to have women on the site. That didn't happen in the first building. In the Métis school, I failed. I also made the proposition that time, but I failed. I was told it's not part of our tradition. Then with this building, I had a bunch of beautiful students with me, and the floor level on the site was really high. And when I was walking through the village, I felt like the women, the wives of the workers, were really shooting me looks that were not so happy. So I was talking to them and we discussed, and then I thought, you know, I just invite them to be part of the team. I'm not asking the husbands, I'm asking them. And they said, yes, of course we would like to work and join, but we don't know what to do. So we were actually figuring out that the plastering work is often done by women, and then that was absolutely beautiful. So we said, okay, next day you're hired. And then say, but don't tell anything to our husbands. And then at 7 o'clock in the morning, the husbands arrived. And 5 minutes later, the wives arrived. So first there were long faces like, oh, the fun is over. And then after like a week or so, they started flirting with their own wives, because it was just, you know, the team spirit was so good on the site, and they queued together for the same amount of salary in the evening. And it was just such a good communication that it really had also an impact on the family level. And that video, if I can get it going, is showing a scene that always really gives me a lot of pain when I see it. That's the scenery that I'm passing by when I'm leaving Dhaka, the capital, to go in the northern part where I'm working. This, you know, to put all these carbon emissions in this wonderful raw material earth just to try to make it better, that's just the absolutely wrong way to refine materials. It would be just, you know, we have the technologies, we have the technical know-how, we have the craftsmanship, and we could do beautiful houses without all these carbon emissions needed at all. So I think this is something, I mean, we don't see this, but of course we have this also in our building materials. And I think we really have to reconsider using the raw materials with all the creativity that we have, and not putting in the carbon emissions to try to make them better. The last building I designed, and that also just won the Obel Award, is kind of a building that is dancing out of tune a bit. Unlike the other buildings that are like straight boxes, this is a center for people with disability, and I wanted to show that it's actually beautiful, that we are not all just a simple box, and that we have a diversity, and that's a wonderful thing to celebrate. So in the ground floor, we have the Center for People with Disabilities, and on the top floor, we have Dipty Textiles, which is a textile studio that I initiated with the NGO Deepshika and a tailor in Laufen, Veronica Lam. And what you see here is that the most dominant sign of this building is a ramp that winds and kind of dances around the building. And it's the only ramp in that area. And a lot of people already during the site were coming to visit the site. And the first question, of course, was always, why do we need a ramp? And then you're immediately discussions for, you know, why inclusiveness is an important thing. And this is what I love in architecture, that it can really make visible and can really build awareness and start discussions. That's the therapy rooms in the ground floor, and then the ramp and the veranda on top. Also here, the bamboo and the mud, and under the ramp, the caves that are a bit difficult to access, but it's kind of a part of the therapy as well. You know, you have to move your body through, so you need a lot of coordination there. And of course, you can also just, you know, if it's too much, of the therapy, you just go and hide yourself away. And that's the top floor with the Dipty Textiles. And this project is, for me, it looks like a textile project, but for me, it's an urban project as well, because, you know, we all shape spaces, no matter if we're planners or architects or urban planners or whatever, everyone does in just the way how we consume clothes. And that's the predominant sector in Bangladesh that shapes the settlement patterns there. And for me, it was difficult to see after 20 years of being in Bangladesh on and off, to see how many women have to live their really beautiful villages and ending up in situations around these textile hubs that are not humane anymore. And how is it possible to turn this around, bring the work to the people and not kind of dragging the labor force all around the country to a few spots where there's just too many people to provide humane conditions. So I thought, okay, I'm at the limits with architecture as a tool here, but I can design clothes that are kind of, can be produced in a decentralized way. And just as in architecture, I'm looking at the local potentials that are there. And in that case, it's not just a simple t-shirt. Bangladesh has such a rich culture of textiles. So I'm digging into these cultures, which are the reused saris, first as blankets, and then as, as clothes. So it's the second upcycling circle to produce clothes for us. I'm also wearing one. So in a way, it's, usually we are letting our cheap clothes produce in those countries, then we wear it 2-3 times, then we send it back, destroy local markets again. And this time we turn the thing around, we sell the old clothes from Bangladesh to our parts in the world. And just as a sign, you can reach a good standard of living, not just by consuming more and more resources, but taking existing resources, adding a level of creativity and care and craftsmanship, and you get a new product and not, needing new resources for that. We also started to document all our projects on those blankets, like the Mete School. It's the backside of the Mete School, the elevation. And the Deshi building. So that, of course, also created a lot of job and work for the women. And that's the main reason why we are doing this. I never planned to have an own fashion label. That was not in the plan, but sometimes, life is leading you different roads, and then you just go to it. You see a potential, you see a need, and then you connect and use the creativity to do something out of it. So this is the master plan of Budapur, and the blue dots that you see here, those are the excavation sources for the mud, which is, all the buildings are built out of mud. And then the bamboo that is also growing all around, that also provides the building material. So the circle is really extremely close, and that makes it so fantastic in terms of environmental sustainability. It may not be in our focus, but about 3 billion people on this planet are living in earthen houses. Of course, the numbers are decreasing. And also reason for that is because no architecture schools and engineering universities are teaching mud and earthen structures. So I brought the mud to Harvard, precisely 60 tons of dirt right in front of the Graduate School of Design. And together with Martin Rauch and 150 students, faculty members, and people from Cambridge, also MIT, joined to transform this rather windy and noisy and unpleasant space in front of the school into a warm place for people together. And it was interesting that the clay in Boston is gray as concrete. It really looked like concrete. Visually, you couldn't differentiate, but people were constantly touching the walls. And I thought, that's interesting, because normally we don't go around cities and caressing walls. So there must be somehow more, in how we perceive materials. And I think especially with earth, it's not just a building material, it's an element. And I think humankind has such a close connection with this material. So it's somehow more senses that are responding to this material. So for upscaling this whole concept of building with the raw earth, of course, you need the education, you need technical development, and also the architecture for it. And we just wrote a book on this topic together with Martin Rauch and Lindsay Blair-Howe. And here's the technical development that would be behind those kind of upscaling systems in earthen structures, because of course, in urban structures, because of course you cannot rotate with water buffaloes in London City. So prefabrication, as developed by Martin Rauch, would be one option. And then, you know, you just staple them. That's the site of Ricola, designed by Herzog Dömeron. So you just, you know, build the blocks on top of each other, and you can insert the insulation, wall heating, and all this kind of electrical fittings. And then you close the joints with water and mud again, and you have this monolithic structure. And that, for example, is a factory that Martin Rauch is just building now, the Earthen Factory, that produces this kind of prefabricated element in Austria right now. And hopefully this kind of system will spread, and ideally every city would have this kind of factory. And whenever you dig a metro or a subway or parking, underneath parking, you know, you take the material, put it to the factory and get the blocks out and build your buildings out of it. And besides the technological development, we also need good architecture that proves you can build with an old material in a modern way. And it's not a question how old the material is, but it's a question of our creative ability to use it for today and for the needs and the dreams and aspiration of the people now. So these were hostels that have a core, a central core out of stone and rammed earth, and attached to it like lampion shades, like Chinese lampion shades, the concons for the youngsters to sleep. That's the guest house, that's slightly different. And for me, it was difficult in the beginning to imagine how I could, you know, do this with the climate and everything. And then I observed the people there, and I thought, first, strange fashion that they're wearing. It's kind of like this material that we use for blankets. And then until I understood, okay, that's a system actually. You're living in a cold room, but you're insulating your body, not the entire house. And you're heating yourself up with the soup or the tea and so on. So I thought, okay, that's an interesting system. And maybe for youth hostels, you can be a bit more radical. So I thought the same thing, you know, you have one warm room in this kind of, in this core. And then at 10 o'clock or 12 o'clock, you ring a bell, you get your hot water bag, which is the heating source. And then you take it to your concon, you have it in your sleeping bag. So you have the insulation around your body, the heating source inside, and you're sleeping in a cold room, which would be pretty a healthy way to sleep. And in the summer, the idea was just to open it and have the wind and the breeze. So with this Bamboo Biennale, the idea was really to improve the image of this kind of traditional building materials, especially the bamboo, but I also brought in the stoneworks and the rammed earth, because for me it's very essential, especially if we look at the next picture, which is, you know, showing at a classical urban space in China, and it's just between 2011 and 2013. China has consumed more cement than the United States in the past century. And it's not just China, it's so many other countries in the world as well. And it happened also in our parts of the world. And this kind of tendency and trend, we just cannot continue in that way. And we clearly need alternatives for this kind of building material. So I very much advocate for less concrete and more earth wherever I am. This picture right hand is, for example, in Ghana, where we also just started a project. That was the original master plan that I got from Ghana proposed. And that's a master plan that was unfortunately implemented for centuries, starting colonial times, and then all the development aid work, which is a disaster in a way, because all around when you look, there are the traditional homesteads. So I tried to twist kind of this kind of master plan and try to integrate more the spaces that I have experienced when I visited the country. And you have all these traditional shapes around. So I try to bring that in the master plan, because I think this is a cultural diversity and beauty that we really also need to keep alive. So this is how I'm designing the buildings. I'm always doing clay storming, which is like working on big 3D models and using my gut feelings, my hand, more than, in a very fast way, because with clay models, you can really work fast. So in a very intuitive way, I'm just trying to follow the impulses. These were some of the inspirations, the Kente textiles that they have in Ghana. So this kind of linear thing. Also, of course, when you have a lot of shade and sun, you can play with these elements. And I try not to use also because it's difficult to work precise. I also designed it in just during the COVID pandemic, so I didn't know if we were able to come. So I was working with this kind of felt rhythm rather than, you know, a standardized measurement, so that it's actually okay if you're out of tune and out of rhythm and an offbeat in a way. Yeah, whenever I'm designing, I'm having this in my mind, which is for me a very essential thing. I don't believe that the world is changing with one big decision. The world is changing with the everyday small decisions that we're taking. So whenever I'm designing and I'm deciding, do I use this paint? Do I use this insulation material? Do I use this material for the wall? This foam glue, whatever. I'm trying to multiply this by 7 billion times in my mind and trying to, you know, just make myself clear, okay, it might be maybe just 10 liters of paint, but if everyone is using that paint, what would be the result for the groundwater, for example? So I'm really trying to scale up my decisions and try not to use more resources than a person in Bangladesh could afford, for example, and also our planet couldn't afford. So I'm trying to bring this way of building also, of course, in the European context, the project that I did with Martin Rauch in an interior space for a high-tech company, Omicron. We tried to bring the very traditional way of building, just using the wet clay and shaping it with the hands, into the Austrian context. And we just built it in the same way, just in a 2-story way. And these are kind of the hangout areas for the employees of Omicron, the power nap niches. Also, you know, you can meditate there, also have your meetings there. And what was interesting, that thing looks very low tech, but it has wall heating and cooling systems integrated and sound systems. And the Zeppelin is also another room that we did. But the thing was, the sad part was that it is also for us, of course, absolutely healthy to build with earthen structures, physically healthy, because mud is so balancing the indoor humidity in such a perfect way. It's healthy for the planet, it's healthy for the people, because it creates job for the society. So why is building with in this kind of way so expensive, while working with materials that harm the environment and the human bodies and so on is cheaper? So First, I felt guilty, you know, it's maybe not the right material here. And now I say, no, it's absolutely the right material, but we need to readjust our economic system. And, you know, capitalism is not a natural force, it's man-made. So of course we can change it. So these are plasterings, earthen plasterings. If you don't go for load-bearing structures, of course, you can also renovate existing structures with a lot of clay involved, and it will really improve the living conditions inside. That's the central building, is a center for sustainability for the Catholic Church that I'm just designing in Bavaria, and that's the boarding school in timber structure that is rammed earth. And yeah, this is going to be a kind of working spaces for lots of organizations that are working for social and sustainable for ecological and social sustainability. That is a mud village in Spain for ecotourism and permaculture. And that's our Corona baby, a birth space that I designed together with Anka Dürr, Martin Rauch and Sabrina Sommer. And this was, that initiative came from women in Austria, in the west part of Austria, in Vorarlberg, and they want, you know, there is a women's museum, and they had their 20th anniversary, and they had an exhibition on the topic of birth. And suddenly the thing came up, we don't have spaces for giving birth. I mean, we have spaces for everything, but we don't have spaces for giving birth. And, you know, as a baby, you come out of the mother's womb, and then normally now babies are born in hospitals. So you come into this extreme light, into, you know, in spaces with materials that are absolutely not tactile. And somehow that doesn't fit. And of course that creates stress. And of course every person experiences birth. And the first moment in life is leaving an imprint. And so we should really probably also work a bit on this blind spot. It seems really to be a blind spot in architecture, that we don't have really spaces for that. So we designed this structure, which is a mud structure. with a raised platform, and then also workshop space, where now during these exhibitions, people are discussing on the topic of birth and having several workshops on it. So that's the platform inside, which is a lime plaster specific one. And here you have the garden with a lot of healing herbs, traditional herbs, and then also kind of a fire blaze. And that the structure was funded by a lot of private persons, more than 400 people. We didn't find much companies to support us, but a lot of private people, especially women, of course, supported that project and also helped building the structure. And we also prefabricated it, brought it on the site, and then covered it with all the wooden shingles, which is tradition in that part in Austria, to keep the mud safe from the water. So they're directly put on top of, or nailed into the mud. And I really loved the organic way the craftsmen did the shingles. And then we painted them all. First, we wanted to paint them with blood, with oxen blood, but that was not really legal. So we used ecological colors. And that was the opening. So, and the last project I want to share with you is the first project I was able to do in my home country, again with Martin Rauch. It was a competition for an altar on occasion of the 1000 year birthday for the cathedral in Worms, which is a very historical place in Germany. And the background is made from Walter the Son Neumann, which is our German Bernini, so somehow. So it was big footsteps that we stepped in, and the priest of this church was extremely nervous. It was this task of building an altar, permanent altar, was passed from one priest to the next priest because no one wanted to touch it and do the wrong statement kind in this church. So the competition, of course, a lot of very great colleagues and sculptors took part, and we won it because we said we're not bringing the finished product, we are bringing the material. And as the altar is kind of a table where the community meets and celebrates, this should be really done and prepared by the community itself. So that was kind of a learning experience from working in countries like Bangladesh, that you have the power in architecture also lies a lot in designing the process. So for me, designing the object is one thing, but designing the process is just equally important. And when you design the process in the right way, you're not just building up a structure, but you're also building a community. And that's for me a wonderful thing. And that's something we only learn, when we are in the field. So we had this really sacred space turned into a construction site for about 1 week. And then all of them came, from young to old, and you see them ramming. And it was quite hard, it was not just something you leave a fingerprint, it was really actually hard, and we need to take a lot of shifts. But it's also clear that if you need to have a little bit, if it's a bit hard to reach a goal, a common goal, the happiness factor in the end is also bigger. And also I very much feel that, this project is quite a symbol of our society. In the background, we have all this gold. And I think that's, our society is not lacking of materials, but we are lacking of good relationships. That's what we are lacking. And this is kind of a gap that the process of architecture can fill, because we can build the community with it. And it was interesting because the people were really, afterwards, the feedback was, normally we're not that harmonious, but we knew we have to finish this thing together, and we have to do this, and we have to reach this goal. And I think that's what we need again as a society. In the past, we came together to build a church or a chapel or a temple or whatever, or some other public buildings, and we don't do this anymore. We kind of have that delegated to experts, but as a society, I think we need these things. And the priest was also extremely active. He was really afraid in the beginning of taking the wrong decision, but interestingly, I mean, he's a man of belief, so he consulted the Bible, and he found a script that, especially not just any, but the part where Moses is getting the 10 commandments from the very top. And there it said, you know, build me an altar, build an altar for me, and build it with earth. And that was, of course, a big boost, you know, okay, we are going in the right direction. It's kind of the higher order. And from that moment on, you know, there was full force and energy in that project. And we also inserted some historic elements in the layers of mud. At the beginning, it was from the Roman Empire and so on. And from day to day, people started to bring in also personal elements like, you know, necklaces, amulets, or, you know, prayer books and the best wine of that region, and grains and seeds and whatever. And the Indian nuns, for example, came and brought in some Indian soil, and they were extremely, you know, emotional, and that they brought a piece of their home into the altar. And you just felt so much that this is actually really as a very symbolic material as well. And in a way also more precious than gold, because, you know, gold you cannot eat, but out of the mud, if you recycle that material, you can build a garden, you can grow the wheat and grow the wine that you need for celebrating again. So this circle is wonderful. And then the moment came here, this picture when the chicken came out of the eggshell, and it was, of course, a beautiful moment that, you know, we were just all excited to see it. And that's how it looks. And the interesting thing is, you know, once the former came off, and it looked as if it was standing there since a very long time already. And that's the power of earth. That's this archaic power. It's with every building, you know, the moment it's standing there, you have the feeling it's standing there since a very long time. It's really rooted to the place. And that's a very powerful, you know, radiance. Alpha and Omega for me is a very important sign, because we architects, we are always in love with the alpha, with the beginning, and we never design the omega, and we don't want to look at it. But in reality, no one builds for eternity. Everything will die, you know, also our buildings. And for me, it's really important to design buildings that are not leaving waste and burdens to the coming generation, but that it's leaving know-how, so that we can use, or the coming generations can really use those materials in their own way and in their own language. You might probably wonder how I am living myself. I'm living in a 500-year-old house in a small town close to Salzburg. And I also have my 6 tons of earth in our apartment, my family's apartment, the oven, the mud oven, and my daughter also got a little meti cave in her room. And we just love the presence of earth. It just really grounds you after a working day when you come home. It's really a wonderful presence there. And my dream would be to build a mud skyscraper right in Manhattan or right in London. Why not? It's, you know, it may seem crazy, but this picture is Shibam, that city was built 500 years ago. So what was possible that long ago should be possible today as well, with using all our technologies that we have and all our know-how. And I strongly believe that if we build more with the local materials, with the natural materials that we have all around us and just below our feet, our homes, our workspaces, and our villages and our cities would not just become more healthy and sustainable, but also more humane and beautiful. Thank you. So now Peter and Jason, would you join me? Yes, thank you.
Yes, we're here.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was incredibly inspiring. It was fascinating to learn about your process and those case studies as well. Peter, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have lots of questions. Thank you firstly for a wonderful lecture, a beautiful lecture. And I think that what's interesting is the ways in which you are swimming against the tide. I mean, we live in a world of abstractions. Yours is a very immediate world. It's very physical. I was thinking yesterday I was in a crit, and some of the projects to me were so abstract, because that's the way architects are taught. They're kind of gridded and abstract and dry. Yours, the words that come to mind for me are there's an intimacy with the world around. There's a strong relationship. And also I think that more and more your work is kind of like an animal nesting. that you celebrate the animal self in the way in which you sniff at the world around, you engage with it, you touch it, and it has this very reciprocal relationship with your body.
I love this image, yes.
Yeah, and in that way, you're returning something that we have lost in this very abstracted world, which is this kind of immediacy, this joy, this connection, the sensual connection with the world around. I mean,
yeah, I totally agree.
agree
You put it in beautiful words, Peter. Yes, I think it's part of our DNA, just as it's part of the DNA of birds nesting in, and if you see it, children, everyone is building a house with whatever you can find, if it's blankets, textiles, or brushes, I mean, there's a lot of branches, there's a lot of thing going on in our childhood, and it's just, and the most boring thing, if you get your tree house built by your dad for Christmas, and he has the biggest fun in preparing this thing and doing this thing, and then for the child it's boring because it cannot be part of this thing. And I think it's very much part of our human nature to want to build physically also something, and we have completely delegated that to experts, including architects. And then when people are giving the key to the ready flat in a way, then they're running to IKEA or to the hardware stores and trying to please this kind of human notion to build the nest. But that's kind of just adding up to the whole consumption, and I think it's a bit of a misled kind of a human urge. And I think in every site, also in Germany, I'm trying to leave some spaces unfinished for the users to do, and that so that they can kind of bring themselves in and really get their hands into that thing and have the feeling they also built it.
the other thing that occurred to me is that looking at your work, you build immediately with what's at hand. Those words you used, that actually everything that we need is right beneath our earth. It's actually now that we have this technical prowess, all these experts, all this money, the fact that we can do we have homelessness. We never had homelessness in the past because people just made their homes. But we have homelessness not just in being able to build for ourselves. We actually don't feel at home. And that's why I think that this is the essential step towards sustainability, is not just that we can use normal things close at hand to house ourselves, but also we have this sense of coming home to the earth that we're building with, the earth that we live on.
Yes, absolutely agree. That's a very beautiful observation.
Okay. Well, we've met before, as you remember, and so one of the things you talked about then is when I asked you what's the important thing in architectural education, because this talk is happening in an architectural school, and you said the first thing you teach them about was happiness.
Yeah, true. It's crazy. We always do the research in the beginning of the semester, and always research outside in the internet. But I think, we should also search within us, what are our real human needs? And I think, if we detach the ego thing, I think we are all very similar in a way. And we all have very similar needs, that thing of participation and feeling at home, and also feeling part of a bigger harmony, the society, and not just showing off. But of course, also the beauty is a big need for human people and beings. And I think, for me, it's more interesting, to look inside and really understand the real needs of people, and then react with the architecture also in quite archaic patterns. And I think the more, you try to press the buttons, these archaic needs, and to fulfill those things, I think the more the spaces are intuitively understood and embraced, and this very direct way of experience in architecture, I think that's, it's not coming from the intellect, it's coming from, so many levels of our human beings. And I think we have to react as architects also on these levels. And for me, the best compliment is always to see children conquering my sites. you know, that I'm always observing that. And when they have big fun on the sites and, big ways, a lot of different ways to use the building, I know that this is a good building. You know, if a building doesn't need a lot of intellectual explanations to understand the value of it, but if it's really intuitively, immediately embraced, then I think I've done a good job. And I think that comes with understanding this kind of mechanisms of happiness and fulfillment of the archaic needs.
Right, that relates to two things. One is that you use the materials close at hand, but to allow you to do that, your process is highly participative in terms of using people. But it seems that being personable, being able to relate to people is absolutely critical in your work.
Yes. But participation can also be very difficult if it's only in the decision-making process. So, I don't know, I have had so often this situation, that we see the participation always, you can vote for this or that, and then it's done, the participation, you've been asked, you've given your proposal, and that's participation, but that's very brain-based. But for me, the experience just shows it that the handy participation, the practical participation is so much more important. Also, all this non-verbal communication that is happening on site, that is really forming communities. That's the powerful thing. And I think that has to do with the hierarchy that we have in our society between the hand and the intellect. I think we should also really value that the craftsmanship more and bring in these elements, not just, the decision-making process.
And you design with your hands rather than with your head, it looks like. Yes. There are more and more things that making models as the way you design rather than making the drawings.
Yeah. That's like what I'm calling clay storming, it's like, it's because what usually happens that you do the research, this thing becomes more and more in the bubble, and then it's maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks into the semester. And then you think now you have to find the perfect answer to all the research that you did, and you're completely blocked.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to do, I'm going to the site, doing this research on the local materials, the local energy sources, and then just, randomly collecting pictures. And then I'm trying to make myself completely empty, like a vessel, and then I'm going to large clay models. And then I'm really following the impulses that are coming straight out of my gut feeling. And sometimes really my hands are taking the lead more than my brain. And I have the feeling, designing is nothing but decision-making, constantly decision-making. Are you going high? Are you going in a light way? Are you going, have a long, strong gesture? It's constantly decision-making. So, and because the hand and the clay is forming so fast, it's not like you have to measure and then you put it and then, and then you cut it and then you cut it. Oh, it was not a good decision. Now you have to put it back. It takes so much time. No, you don't do it. It's with the clay, it just goes so fast. And then you just come to a point when you're really in a good flow that you just follow impulses and you just feel, okay, this is the right way. This is the right scale. This is the right personality of the building, and you just, I'm just closely connected to my gut feeling and my hands. And I really feel that I have to feel that the building's in my hands. Sometimes it works also with sketches, but mostly really with the fingers. And you have immediately the 3D thing, of course you can do this on the computer as well, but it's a total different thing, because same time you see the whole thing, but you can also zoom in the details. So you have a much more holistic view on the things. And you're working with both hands, means with both hemispheres of the brain. So that really creates a very, creative situation. And I think, for me, it's always surprising what's coming out. And I don't have a style. I never can tell what's coming out, but it's always something that really fits to the place, luckily, so far.
Right. So it's where we started the conversation. It's a very intimate and immediate relationship that you have when you're creating things. We are deluged with questions, so perhaps we should ask, Jason will read out some of the questions to you, and perhaps there are other things that we can pick up and discuss, because I have lots of things to talk about also, but still, there's so many other people want to ask you questions.
We've had some nice comments, and I'll start off with one from Will Hunter, who's a student at the LSA. He says, "Thank you, Anna. Beautiful lecture. I want to dive through the screen into these magically sumptuous spaces. Very inspiring. We do have a question from Kai, and they ask, and it's about the standardization of local materials. Was that something you did? Was that something that emerged, or did you not seek to standardize the local materials?
Yes, I'm building in Germany, so it's damn difficult, but it's possible. You just need a lot of, to be very headstrong. But yes, I mean, you can, of course, do the blocks, make testing blocks, and get them into this pressure machines and whatever, this instrument that pressure, how much pressure the mud can take, and then you have the numbers and you put it in the structural calculations. So it's, of course, in Switzerland, for example, it's more easy. You just need the signature of the engineer. In Austria, you need the signature of the mayor. And in Germany, you have to constantly do the proofing and the analysis of the building material. And I mean, that's kind of the thing, earth is a non-standardized material. It's locally always different. And that's also a beautiful thing because you don't have a patent on it, which is a good thing because that means it's emancipatory approach. That means, that the material is for free and it's know-how and the people that are getting the profit. But the thing, and it's also beautiful that the earth is everywhere different because, when I'm going to Bangladesh, there are no stones and I can build with cobs. So I can go in a curved way because I don't have a formwork. Whereas in Austria, there's a lot of stones in it. So you go for rammed earth, which needs a formwork. So it's much more expensive to go in curves. So you go more edgy. So you have automatically, when you're really taking this material serious, you already create a specific architectural language with those things. And then you have the local climates that again, create a specific parameter. And if you take this parameter seriously, then you create an architecture that is absolutely authentic and really done for this, made for this space. And that also, this authenticity also has a lot of power that we are losing also quite a lot in contemporary architecture because they become so random. Because with our modern materials, you can build in an arid zone just as the same way as in a humid zone, and that's kind of then the style, the style that you transport to Dubai or that goes to whatever, Singapore. And my approach is a different one. But so yes, with the standardization, I think there should be kind of guidelines that when you follow those guidelines that you are on the safe side. But if you know the material better than this, then of course you should not be hampered by this guideline. So I would make it rules, but I think we should have guidelines for working with these materials.
We had another question regarding kind of structural strength, particularly with the kind of the bamboo buildings you mentioned. How did you achieve kind of such apt or optimal structural strength with those structures?
Yeah, that's also a lot of testing. I cut out this part in the lecture because it would have been too long. But I mean, like the structure, we first, when we did the Métis school, we had done tests with a beautiful bamboo from Colombia that was thick and straight and everything. And we had asked in Bangladesh, about the thickness, and it turned out that, someone misunderstood how you call that, the cross section and the diameter somehow. Right. So it was a completely different diameter in the end that we had calculated originally. And then you stand there and first engineer said, you can only build the ground floor, but not the top floor. I'm not giving the okay for that. And you think, my God, I mean, the school without the top floor is not possible. And then what did we do? The bamboo was very curved, and then we took it actually as an advantage. We built the ceiling in a slightly vaulted way. We also, used tools to push it. And then, we did a one-to-one mock-up, and then we put, the mud on top, and just every person as close as you could get, everyone standing there. And that this was the structural test in the end, the maximum load of people. And then you just built the first building, then, maybe the second building, you add another beam, a palm beam, because it's swinging a bit, and so you just, go with the experience.
I was also going to ask, in relation to the projects you mentioned, like, do you design for deconstruction with your projects, or?
Yes, so I'm really trying that the buildings are as compostable as possible. Of course, for the foundation is something that is difficult, but at least, you know, with the brick foundation, you can chop the bricks and reuse the bricks again. So I'm really trying to do the most possible. The foundation is, I would say, the only thing that I'm saying that cement is a good material for that one, but not in the walls. You know, there's a right material for every purpose. Yeah. And I think that's something, you know, I would very much like to have cement to be at a higher cost, because, you know, it's a precious, not a bad material, but it's a precious material, and we should have a real price on that material so that the overuse is stopping, because this is really a dramatic situation that we're causing to our climate, that we're using it in that vast amount. So this is certainly something that we need to reconsider. But yes, that's my hope, is really that my buildings can go back to the ground. And with the mud houses, you know, even with the Austrian structure, with all the electrical fittings inside and the pipes, you know, you just make the whole thing wet, take the pipes out, and you can easily get them out and recycle them again.
We've got a question from Lenka as well. Does 3D printing technology have a place in your approach or process?
Yeah, I mean, we did, for example, the structure in Omicron, and also the one at the Biennale in 2016 would have been a very good example for 3D printing the thing. You know, I think would be quite easy to do this thing. But on the other hand, you know, I've experienced it so often, you know, being stressed out in the office, coming to the site, having my hands in the mud, and it's like, that grounds you. It's like gardening. and you know, and shaping the material just with your own body. That's such an immediate way of building, and it would be such a pity to delegate this kind of, you know, satisfaction that you get from the process completely to machines. While I understand, of course, this is a small project, but for bigger structures, like I showed, the prefabrication, that is a 3D plotter, you know, that takes over the hard work, the ramming work, and then still, you know, all the retouching is done with the hand. So the good thing with the mod is that you can use it in a very high-tech way, and you can use it in a very low-tech way, completely carbon neutral. And you can combine it, and it always depends on the context, you know, the cultural context, the context of the project itself, the timeline, and everything. And it's always, you know, you have to have the sensitivity to choose the appropriate usage for that. But I just would be sad if we delegate, you know, every building process to machines, because I think we are suffering as a society quite a lot from mental illnesses and so on, depression. And I just felt it with myself, you know, that this is such a good way and therapeutic element as well, you know, to build something. It's really building up your own confidence as well. And you see the results after a day, which we hardly see when we are just behind the computer the entire day.
The 3D printing is much less participative in the function of building.
Exactly.
You're using your intuition. Your designs are not accurate drawings, they're kind of instructions to inspire the craftsman and so on. And I think that whole level of physical engagement and creativity is removed with the 3D printing. So
exactly.
Sorry, return to questions that are coming in.
Yeah, we do have one from another student, from Aaron. And Aaron is interested in the ideals of decolonizing design processes, as in the West, we elevate Western design principles and consider non-Western processes, such as mud as material and basket weavings, as comparatively unworthy. And Aaron asks, is it a conscious intention that you are working with decolonial theory within the way you work? Whilst working in Eastern and African contexts, do you have any specific methods of local engagement or of understanding the needs and cultures of the area? And it goes on, pardon me. Are there ways you ensure you give back to the area, and are there ways you give credit to the local methods without appropriating them?
Yeah, so in the beginning, I thought, you know, probably because I'm a German, I thought, you know, my task is coming from Germany to bring the perfect technology, you know, to build the most durable buildings. That was how I started initially. And I understood that this is not what is needed. I mean, of course, you come from the outside, you know, and it's clear that the color of the skin is giving you a different voice. And but well, the whole hierarchy system was completely confusing in Bangladesh, because I was younger than the workers. I was a woman, but I had a white skin, so it was like, it was all confusing. And luckily we came to the point where we just said, you know, I was very keen on breaking all these hierarchies. You know, I was, because suddenly we felt, you know, workers, those who were carrying the mud were the lowest one. Those who were working in the mud were the second lowest one. Those who were working with tools in the bamboo were already higher. So we made sure that also we as architects and engineers were also doing this job and all the other jobs, you know, just to show that everyone is equally important. And there were situations, for example, smoking cigarettes is always a sign, you know, of hierarchy. It's like, even, you know, if you're 50 years old and your boss is coming and you're smoking, then you suddenly do this thing, you know, the smoke is coming out behind your back, but you try not to, because you're not supposed to smoke in front of a senior person. So the workers never knew if, because of a woman and younger, of course, you know, you smoke, but because of the skin, they just know. So at one evening, we were just sitting together in the tea stall, and then they just gave me a cigarette, said, Anna, smoke a cigarette. Don't think about the problems on the side. Smoke a cigarette with us. And then we just were smoking. It was my first cigarette, because I'm a total non-smoker. But it was, you know, it was just so good just to be able to break all these hierarchies and box thinking, and just to say, you know, we are one team, and we want to, you know, reach a common goal. And that just, and the process helps for that a lot. And yeah. I felt that what I'm trying to do now is always, you know, because I'm coming from outside, my voice is heard, and I also have the curiosity to see the beauty in the ordinary things, which is difficult in your own context, because it's not exotic, you know, you don't have this fresh look. So I know this is the situation I'm coming from, and I'm not trying to blend that out. And what I can do is just to raise the trust of people that all that they have is all that they need to build something beautiful. And this, but that's kind of the same thing that I'm trying to do here as well. So I'm trying, this is what I'm really trying. I'm trying to bring all the lessons learned from building in Bangladesh also to the European context. And I'm not building differently here. I'm really following a global approach for sustainability, because I really don't believe in a sustainability that is so high tech that only a small part of the world's population again can afford it. So I really believe that we, you know, and that's the common sense logic to use what you have. So this is how I'm trying to level things, and, you know, not think of boxes, and I'm just, you know, acting as a human being, and we are one humankind, we have one planet, and that's my perspective.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because we've got a question from Leo, and he asks, how optimistic are you to see improvements to building regulations for building with earth, as there are obviously some big hurdles to overcome, particularly in the West?
I'm very optimistic, because we have the climate on the side, you know, we have the climate on our side, we have to reach the climate goals. And yes, I think all this, like 3 years ago, you would not have read in BBC or in BBC or in any other newspaper that cement is having such an impact on the environment. That's just, you know, late news that are coming in discussions on earth and structure. When I was a student, I never saw any magazine, you know, where there was an earth and structure somehow in it. So, and this is becoming much more a topic now, and all sorts of media are now also talking about this thing. So I think, you know, and plus people are tired of this randomness in a way, you know, we are looking for meaning again. We're really having a longing for meaningful architecture. And I think that all leads, and especially because the climate is on our side, I think I'm really convinced that this will change, because carbon emissions will come. Not, you know, I think like 5-6 years, and then we have to be really ready. So education is really key for that.
We've got another question from Elliot. He says, have your buildings, particularly in Bangladesh and outside of the Western canon, have they inspired other buildings that have been built since? Like, has there been, how has it influenced other local vernacular?
Yes, they are built by wonderful Bangladeshi architect colleagues, and also of course from your communities. And for me, the nicest thing was that somehow the perception changed. It was before, it was earth and mud was seen as a temporary state. You know, if you cannot afford a brick building now, then you go for a mud building. But as soon as you can afford it, you go for a brick building. But to see kind of the mud equal to brick or concrete, that was something, that perspective was coming in through this building in Budapur. And of course it takes some time, and I'm an impatient person. I would like to have things happening much faster. But I mean, it's centuries of history that is, you know, going in the other direction, and the lobbyism is very strong. You know, when you go the highway, every 5 minutes you're going to be hit by an advertisement on cement, on aluminium, on steel, on air conditioning. That's the next thing. You know, you need air conditioning in these houses, and mud, you don't need it. So yeah, these things are there, and it's a strong force. But I think, you know, once the carbon emissions are coming in, and once a reconsideration process is starting, and I think that is happening right now already, then I think the change is coming much faster. I'm really sure of that.
Sure. That might be an interesting thing for you to elaborate a little bit more when you said about the air conditioning and so, is that the advantages of mud in terms of the internal climate, absorbing smells, absorbing moisture and releasing moisture, controlling temperatures and so on. That's something. Pardon?
It's very clear. I mean, every farmer would tell you in Bangladesh that the mud house is cool in summer and warm in winter. It's basically because there's so much humidity in the air. And we all know when it's hot and humid, it feels even more hot. And when it's cold and humid, it feels more cold. And because of this balancing of the humidity, of course, there's a huge contributor to the comfort. And also, of course, the thickness of walls is an important thing. And if you build with materials that are there in abundance, like the mud, then you can build with thick walls. And that, of course, adds to the climate comfort a lot. And yeah, that's the crazy thing, you know, when we remember the picture from China, first, these people were first living in houses made out of natural materials, then they are moving into these structures that are made with a lot of carbon emissions, and then they need the air conditioning to sustain, you know, to survive in this, or to feel comfortable in this structure. So this is, and this is crazy, you know. Also India, I don't know the numbers by heart, but it's just a huge amount of air conditioning that is needed, that is just impossible to sustain our planet. So we and our resources. So we really need to think of completely low-tech systems. So, like for example, in the Herb Center for Ricola in Switzerland, that was designed by Herzog Dömeron. That is a fact. I mean, this you know, this Ricola things, or is considered, and it's considered as a medicine also. So there are very high regulations in how to store the plants, the herbs, and that would have needed a lot of, you know, technological input to keep the moisture content always balanced. And it's also, you know, there is technical failure possibilities. You always have to include even more technology to be sure, you know, even if there's a failure, that you don't lose all the herbs, for example. So, and with the clay walls, it was super easy, you know, they work always, you know, and they didn't need all this technology anymore. They just needed a big ventilator on the ceiling, and that was all the technology they needed. So the mud is actually quite a high-tech material, although it's very low-tech and very basic, but it has a high-tech performance. And I mean, now we are spending so much time indoor, and we really have to be careful what kind of materials are in our walls, because we are breathing these things. And if we want to have a burned waste, burned car tires or whatever in our walls, or do we have really a healthy earth in the walls? And It's just, you know, the thing that we go into a new apartment and we say, oh, it smells new. I mean, that's toxic, you know. A new site shouldn't smell like this. And that's the thing, you know, we have to be getting much more sensitive with our third skin in a way. Our second skin, not third skin.
Go ahead.
No, you can continue. I've got some summarizing.
Sure. You've got some people are asking about how the waterproofing for the mud structures and kind of the mix, and kind of maybe a bit more. If you could elaborate on that,
Yes.
please.
So what happens when clay particles get wet? They expand. So that means that they close all the cracks that are in the walls, and the water cannot penetrate deep in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets wet in the first like 2 centimeters or so. And then that's where you need the stones or the straw inside, because also bigger stones, like 6 centimeter stones. So that means that these stones in the back are sticking still in the hard mud, and they're protecting and stabilizing the facade on the front. And because the water is also exhaled in a very fast way, it's drying out very fast and stabilizing itself again. So there is an erosion in the beginning, like 1-2 centimeters, that you have to add on your structural calculation. And then, you know, after this roughness has appeared, then the erosion is stopping. And it was fascinating in Bangladesh to see that also after, I think, 4 years, a kind of a crystallization process happened. It's, you know, when you breathe in the humidity and exhale it again, or the walls to the thing. So there's a kind of a crystallization thing, and that I've seen in African countries as well as in Asia and here in France and so on, in old mud houses. So they became really, really strong.
It's interesting you mention that, because you get the sense that in kind of Western society, Western capitalist society, you can't imagine sacrificing 2 to 3 centimeters of wall thickness due to the loss of space you'd get within a floor plan. We've got a question from Alexander Fress, an alumni at the LSA. He says, which architects do you draw your inspiration from? And he goes on, the battle between sustainable construction and design versus economic forces resonates with the difficulty Hassan Fathy faced in Egypt. How do you see architects being able to influence this battle?
Yes, of course, Hassan Fathy is a wonderful example of doing beautiful earthen architectures, definitely a source of inspiration. But the biggest inspiration I'm really taking from vernacular structures, you know, from this wisdom to understand, to read the sites in terms of material resources and the climate, is just ingenious. And I think, you know, with using those kind of technology or wisdom and know-how and giving it a different twist, a contemporary twist, that's kind of what for me is the beautiful thing, and what's itching my creativity, or kind of, you know, teasing my creativity.
Sure. A few others have asked if you could elaborate on bamboo's durability and how it is treated and kind of preserved for longevity.
Yeah, with the bamboo, I really had troubles in the Métis school, because as a Bavarian, I had absolutely no idea about bamboo, and the farmers figured that out pretty fast, that I had no idea about the bamboo. So I thought that the nice green bamboo looked beautiful, which is absolutely the wrong thing to do, because you have to take the matured one. Mm-hmm. So that's what happened. And then after I think 6 years or so, I got a phone call from the headmaster in the school, and he told me, Anna, there are so many beetles in the bamboo, you know, it's a big disaster. So, and I thought, oh my God, you know, it's like, you know, of course the first building is always your baby. And you feel like, I felt it physically. I couldn't sleep again. I couldn't eat. It was like, it took the next plane to Bangladesh. And then the workers were absolutely relaxed, said, you know, that's life. I mean, it's just, you know, things are degrading. I mean, that's life. And it's also no drama. We know how to do it. We built it with the Métis school. We built it with the Deshi building the structure. We know how to do it. All we need is the bamboo. So we learned, we planned our own bamboo now. And the result was that the workers trained, you know, they completely redid the whole bamboo structure in a short amount of time. It looked just as before, you wouldn't see the difference. I wasn't there. They did it all on their own. I thought, you know, I have to bring engineers in with everything without scaffolding, without any crane, anything, you know, but they just knew how to do it. And they trained a new you know, new and younger team of bamboo craftsmen. So the know-how was somehow passed on. And that was the moment. And then we learned that we have to grow the resources again. And that's kind of the thing that I learned, that was my biggest learning lesson from Bangladesh, to understand, you know, it's not about the materiality, it's really about the know-how that those processes are creating. And architecture and sustainability should be really measured on the level of know-how that is created, and not, you know, on the materiality and the durability, because we are a waste society. We should admit it, and we should build in that way, really. And that's what I learned from the bamboo. And now I'm just trying to do it in a way that it's easy to be replaced and to have the bamboo forest.
Speaking of it being replaced, what is the lifespan of those structures? And say, for example, the Meti school.
I mean, the Deshi building was built in 2007, and we haven't replaced the bamboo yet. That's a good one. But we had used a little bit of this boric salt. That was what the Indians, we got the advice to do so. I don't know. I would also like to go without. So let's see. It's the most important thing is to go for a matured bamboo. That's the most important thing. And I think, you know, to also water it, to wash out the sugar, and to, of course, to harvest it at the right time after the rainy season, not before the rainy season, and so on, all these things.
Do you have like an expectancy for it? Or is that kind of not?
No, well, but I'm also not afraid anymore. I used to panic about this thought, you know, but now I know that the people are there to do it. I mean, the last building they did all on their own. It was just incredible. This really curved structure was really not an easy one. They did on their own, and they trained new people. So they have the workers are there, the bamboo is there. So I'm not worried about that.
Okay, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, I think what you said, the worker said to you, well, that's life. And I think this is in a way what your whole story has been about. That's life. Thinking about what you've been talking about, it all seems so sensible compared to, and also so kind of very wholesome. Your values seem to be actually so much pro-life, pro-community, pro-participation, pro-the earth. I remember when I spoke to you before, you said that a lot of these values came from your experience as Girl Guide. And what you had to say about that was rather beautiful. I thought it might be an interesting thing to reflect on again.
Remember that part. Yes, it's true. I mean, I found it fascinating as a teenager, you know, to be like a few weeks per year completely unplugged, and you go with your tents, and we had these beautiful yurts, and we built a whole small town for 100, 200 maximum people, and with the aim to leave nothing behind than, you know, good memories in a way. And we had, when we always asked that, you know, we were never on pre-made campsites where you had toilets and infrastructure already existing. No, we built everything, you know, we built the whole thing from scratch. And then, you know, you take some trees from the surrounding, but we also always had like 2-3 days of environmental work where we just gave back, you know, the things. And we built structures, we built towers, you know, we built public buildings, we built, you know, the infrastructure and everything. And then in the end, you know, you leave the place, and there's nothing left, just good memories. And that for me was, of course, a very you know, that left imprints on certainly on my way. And also, you know, the thing how I started the lecture, to do this with students, you know, to say, okay, I mean, still so many people on this planet know how to build a house. I mean, how many architects are able to build a house?
Yeah, it sounds like a perfect architectural education. Since we're talking in architectural school, it seems like a really good way of summing up a kind of hands-on, participative, connecting with everything around you approach, and getting out of your head and into your hands and your body and so on. That's a wonderful way to teach architecture, perhaps.
Yeah, I love it that way.
Well, I think perhaps that's a fitting note to end on. Thank you so much, Anna and Peter, for your time this evening, and of course to those who helped make this happen. Do stay tuned. We have Marina Tabassum next week, same time, same place, although she's zooming in from across the world. But again, thank you, Anna, and hopefully see some of the people in the audience again soon. But until then, goodbye.